I've always wanted to be one of the most in sport, and this is in sport and life, studies and everything. Like, I always try my absolute best. Like, I'm overly competitive to the point, like, I ruin sport for other members of my family and my friends because it's just not fun for them, because I will go to any length to win.
Hey everyone, welcome to our podcast, The Bold Tackle. We are your hosts, Sophie Howard and Oliver Howard, and we are ready to tackle bold topics in sport,
highlight the women's football industry,
and speak about the unspoken.
If you are ready to get an insight into what really goes on behind the scenes, join us on our journey and listening
to The Bold Tackle. Hi and welcome back to a new episode of our podcast, The Bold Tackle. Hi Sophie, hi Rachel, love to have you both here.
Hi Ollie, hi Rach. Rach, thanks so much for joining us. First question, how are you and how's B-Hub going?
I'm good. It's obviously going slower than you want it to. I think that's all rehabs. That is what happens. You want it to always go quicker.
What's the injury?
I had knee surgery, just like what would be in its simplest form explained as a tidy up. But it's my 5th surgery on my left knee, so there's not that much left to tidy up, but what is left is quite a mess. So it went well. It's just being 35 and having quite a lot of degenerative damage in there. It's just a little bit harder this time to kind of progress through each little step. So we're just kind of plugging away at trying to keep moving forward, which we are, but it's just we're at that stage where you spend a lot of time in the gym and it's important you do all those little extra bits.
But you still want to put your body through it?
I think so.
For the people who don't know you yet, I've seen you play with Sophie quite a few times, but I don't know too much about you personal. Maybe there's a couple of viewers who don't know too much yet. Can you just give us a quick roundup of who Rachel Corsie is?
Oh, quick summary. I'm 35 and I'm currently Scotland captain, Aston Villa captain. I've played professional football in the formal sense of professional since I was 24, so that was 2014. And then before that I'm of that generation whereby football wasn't professional yet when I first started senior football. So first played for the national team when I was 19 in 2009, and still going 16 years later. So yeah, super quick summary. That's me.
Did you always know you wanted to become professional in football, or were you just good at it and when the opportunity arose, you took it? Because 24, talking in football terms, normally is pretty late, right? I mean, if you look at the girls and women now, they start with 16, where there wasn't that opportunity or possibility for you. But was that something you were working towards and just waiting for it to happen, or did it just happen?
I definitely wasn't working towards it. I sort of never really had any aspirations to be a pro athlete until I was one, which probably sounds quite crazy, but in the sense of me turning pro at 24, that is me considering it when football became my full-time job. And so I would have said for the 5 years before that, I say from sort of the age of 19 when I was playing for Glasgow City, which at the time were the best team in Scotland, I probably trained as often, if not more, than what I train now as a full-time professional. But you just did that either side of work or studies or whatever that had to be. So I didn't technically become professional until I was 24. And because the opportunities weren't there, I'd probably say now and today, that's one of the things I'm most proud of, that I can still play at one of the considered most elite environments, having not had that really fundamental introduction to top level sport. Like I was totally amateur from, youth football wasn't even really structured in any way. I did play football when I was, teenage years, but it was very recreational. But yeah, there just wasn't really any visibility. I think when I first played for the national team in 2009, there was one, maybe two players that would have played football full time and got paid for it. There was sort of one or two that maybe had an environment that sort of, they had endorsements that meant football was their priority, but it didn't potentially give them much of an earning. There was maybe only one player that was considered actually like paid for a living. So when I was kind of coming through that, you didn't aspire to that because that wasn't overly, truthfully, that wasn't that lucrative. I was quite academic at school, so sport was always the outlet for me. I studied accounting and finance, became a chartered accountant, and I just found both always married quite well together, other than there was definitely time constraints as things get more and more serious. But I just quite enjoyed that balance. I quite enjoyed the competitiveness and the demands of work and studying. And then I liked in the evenings going to play football and kind of getting the endorphins or just getting that relief, getting rid of the stress and then going back to it. I really enjoyed that. So some people say now, would you rather have it this way? Or would you rather go back and do it, with the frameworks that are in place now? And it's not that I think that's amazing, the growth that has happened. But I know that I have totally loved so many different parts of my journey.
And it made you stay sane. Maybe you wouldn't be in the position you are in now if you had that framework set up. Because you spoke about how proud you were of getting where you are now without that professional framework and setup. I speak to Sophie a lot about this. I think like your age and down to like 30, 31, 29, it's a lot about mentality. It seems like you guys are mentally probably just stronger because you had to go through more and want it more and fight for it more, and saw how it could have been as well without owning anything. And others come into it and learning the technicality, the athleticism, but don't have that mental fight of, I'm going from work straight to training. That's all they do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think in some ways that those little hurdles and that resilience and building that resilience, I think that's really, like, I genuinely believe that's something that's really important in life. And it's something I probably speak quite a lot about now because it's almost one of the, I guess it's one of the consequences of the game developing and becoming more professional and what we identify as professional and the things that come with it and how that ultimately does impact people. And I think one of the things that's in our advantage in the women's game is the men's game is further ahead than us and has developed before we've developed, and therefore there are so many lessons to learn to not make the same mistakes or to find that growth quicker or the most efficient way. But I still think there are unfortunately some things that people perceive to be part of the professional game that sort of feed into that narrative of they actually avoid players or they make players not experience certain adversities. And I actually think that doesn't necessarily do the best for us as people. And I think it's quite an interesting conversation and debate because naturally we all like it when it's easier. We all would, if we had the choice, if you could choose the future, we all would probably choose the simpler route and the easier route. But deep down and underneath that, the harder route probably bears more fruit. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of that balance. And, in some ways, I always try and just bring that perspective and try and use that to help just your teammates around you to understand, to at least understand or find perspective when there's tougher moments or there's just decisions to make or conversation to have in the changing room. Like, it's quite easy to get sucked into things that maybe aren't the best use of our energy. It's easier said than done, and for sure I've got myself sucked into negative conversations in the past. But when you're having a wise moment and you've got some wisdom, then I also do try and offer some balance to that too.
How are you finding that, having these conversations? Because you obviously like one of the most experienced within both setups, club or country, and I find it very difficult to pass on that perspective because there's players that haven't been through what you, as a more experienced player, have been through, and therefore maybe they're not too receptive of your, I guess, advice in that moment.
Yeah. I think I always think deep down, if you say it in the right way, or you try and say it in the right way, and hopefully it's heard in the right way, even if it's met with resistance, it has still been heard. And it's not always the case, but I think that's where what I've sort of learned, I think the biggest thing I've learned is one of the most important things is to know what your values are. And that just helps you make good decisions. And I always just think that there's certain things that are like non-negotiables for me. Like, I think in a team environment, doing things for the greater good of everyone is always more important and the most important thing. And I think giving yourself the best chance to do your best is probably right up there as well. And therefore, I think when I always think about those two things, and it always just helps me to have, I think, be willing to have those conversations, because you always know deep down the reason you're doing it is for a positive outcome. You're doing it for the best of other people. You're doing it to create something that's better than it is today. And that for me, therefore, makes it worth having the conversations, even when I'm met with resistance, or even when somebody doesn't agree, or even if there's a bit of discomfort because you're saying it to someone who you know doesn't like to be challenged or has a big influence on other people. I always just find it easier to have peace at night being like, I genuinely did that because I wanted it to be the best thing for everybody. So, yeah. And if some people don't want to hear it, then there are people who you can't always help, but maybe someone in the background heard it, and therefore you maybe didn't help the person directly, but indirectly you've helped someone else.
Do you think it's changing as women's football is getting more and more professional? Well, I spoke to Sophie and Kirsty about this in one previous episode, and they said how strong the Scottish team was as a team. And you just spoke about this value of team being above an individual. Do you think it's going to be more difficult as time comes, that people are more focused on one's performance individual because there's more to get, more to achieve as an individual, more money to earn, more selfishness, therefore, that's going to be harder to get that value of team above all, get that through to the players in future?
Yeah, I think so. I think some of that comes from a societal nature. And I think that's often, I think it becomes more complex to get people to behave a certain way when there is sort of the reward of, the financial gain becomes greater. And probably when I played in the US was probably one of the best examples of that, because at the time when I was in the US, I was there from 2015 to, so at the beginning of 2015 until the end of 2021. And that was probably over the course of the US winning 2 World Cups. So a lot of their players were superstars. And over the 3 teams I played for, I played with different players that were in that, national team setup, had been involved in all that success. And, you know, quite literally, if you score the winner in the World Cup final, and if you assist the winner in the World Cup final, the financial gain between those two people is significantly different, because the marketability of the person that scored the winner to the person that assisted it is worth millions. Which, if you ask, you know, 100 people on the street, 99 of them, I'm going to say, would probably choose, they would want to be the person that scored the winner than to set up the winner. And that's like human nature. It's difficult to say, no, I'd rather be the person that assisted, when you know that that's at stake. And that's just one example. But that sort of trickles down into lots of different ways as the game continues to grow. You know, being in the starting 11 becomes then the be-all and end-all. Or, you know, having a good game when you play the top teams becomes the be-all and end-all, because it might mean you get a move to them. Or being the top scorer in the league. Like, all these things all of a sudden start to have a number put on top of them that is a direct reward for an individual. And so that naturally is going to skew people's ability to be for the team. But I think that's also why you need to have a mix of characters, and you need to have a mix of different types of players. And those players need to be the people that probably have a little more resilience and are a little tougher and can hang in there in the tough moments. Because those players are going to be the players that are less likely to be individually driven and are therefore going to be more likely to dig in and get you out of situations that are tough. And every team, even the best teams, the teams that from the outside look like it's all, you know, sunshine and happiness and good times, even the best teams suffer. And even the best teams rely on those people that are spoken about the least, that are like forgotten about at times. They are often the glue to those teams. And it's probably a little bit of a shame that those people get less limelight, because they are so valuable. And the best teams have them. But people naturally put more focus and more attention, and it appears to be more attractive to be sort of that superstar, and the ones that are on the bigger contracts, and the ones that, you know, sell more shirts. And
but you won't.
I can understand that.
But you won't get the people to be team players if it's incentivized by money. They are being rewarded of focusing only on themselves. And as I hear, you would probably prefer the, I'd say, unselfish team player over the individual. But that's not what management or media or whoever wants.
Yeah. But that then just that you could have a team full of low-key players that just, you know, want to be there per team. And to be fair,
Then a couple of men teams that do that, don't they?
I think probably in Scotland that's maybe some. I have some affinity to that with them or with us, because we have some amazing players, you know, likes of Erin and Caroline. Like, in my head, they are superstars, but they have a humbleness to them too, because they've come through a pathway that's also required them to you know, earn the right to have the opportunities they've had. But I think for the most part, we're more of a humble group. There's more of us that have the history of just that hard work. And so I think that's why a lot of us do find that environment really rewarding. But I think I don't dislike players that are selfish. It doesn't necessarily make me have any sort of negativity towards them at all. I think I'm probably a little more objective, and Sophie will tell you this. I'm quite straight up, and just I kind of say it how it is. But I think it's just good to know that that's who those players are, because you might need those in some moments. They're hugely valuable in those moments when they can do, you know, they score the winner, or you need them to do something magic, or you need them to, you know, be selfish in a moment, shoot off the cuff and score the goal that wins you the game. That you do, those players do have great value too, and that is why they get those contracts at times. And, you know, they in their own right have earned them, so they are valuable. But it's just good to know that how people are motivated and what's important to people, because in different moments, you might not need a selfish player. You might need someone that's going to work for the team. Or you might need to know that someone's behaved a certain way and it needs to be called out, and you need to have that type of conversation with them, whether that's around the group or whether it's in a private moment. To me, it's more just about, you need different individuals and people need to be themselves. And I wouldn't want to play in a team with someone who was selfish but tried to hide it. I'm like, if that's you, that's totally fine. We can use that to our advantage. So that's probably how I look at it, rather than likes and dislikes, or how. I think you take everyone as they are and you try and get the best out of everybody, and that then therefore gives the team the best chance.
That's then, for me, about creating the environment where everyone feels like they can be themselves without being scrutinised and constantly criticised for who they are. However, knowing the values of the team. I think that's, for me, one of the most fundamental things in building a team that will be successful in the now, but also in the future.
Yeah. And I think it can be really difficult, because also what makes people feel comfortable is different things.
Yeah.
So it can be really challenging. And I think probably back to the national team, there was a period whereby, there was probably a little bit of an edginess to the environment, which, there was probably a number of contributing factors, and for different players, it was different factors that made people feel like that. But without intention, there was not one single player wanted there to be that ever an element of, strain or not that cohesion, because it wasn't for the players wanting it to feel like that. It's just quite natural, if you're a new player, maybe first time in camp, or it's maybe not your first time in camp, maybe you've been in lots of camps, but the people you're friends with aren't in camp, or maybe you've got something personal going on, or maybe you've got, tension with a coach, or something happened at the last camp and you're not sure if it's going to be the same this camp. There's so many things go into it that it can just take different things to create an environment that doesn't just quite feel cohesive. But I think we probably spent quite a lot of time as a national team just having conversations that over time and at different points in that journey, more and more people felt comfortable. And then as more people feel comfortable, as more people can feel vulnerable, the other people that maybe aren't there yet see that, and that just helps them. And I think the national team is just such a good example of an environment that didn't feel like it was in a place where it could flourish. Now it does feel like it's in that place. And it's really nice that alongside that, there's been some really good results. Because on the outside, that's always what everyone kind of will use as a marker and a measure. But being inside, to have both things is actually such a great feeling.
But was there great turnover in the Scottish national team? Because it feels like the team has been, or the base of the team has been playing together for a long, long time now. And I think that will probably help a team grow together as well, if there's always a similar group and not a huge turnover of new players coming in, old players going out constantly.
Yeah, of course. Then I think that's what helps when you go away for 9 days or, a period of time together. It's quite an intense environment. Like it's tough if you don't feel comfortable. And also, as you say, if there's some consistency there, and then you start to get to know people on a much closer level, much more personal level, then I think you're right. I think that definitely does help. But I don't think it necessarily would help if there wasn't that willingness and openness from the players to want to buy into it, because it would also be quite easy to go to every camp but just not engage in that if you didn't want to. And I think there's probably different camps. Some people, come into camp in different headspace for, again, different reasons. Because a lot more people know people on a personal level, there's also room for people to have camps where they're like, probably when there's downtime, I just need to be in my room chilling. And there's other camps you'd be like, no, I want to be playing cards or doing games or chatting at the dinner table. So I think just having that flexibility becomes important. And I don't think you can fake that. I think you have to try and create it. You have to actively participate in creating that environment. And it's great vibes.
I think there's two things that you mentioned there, and for me, it's really important for people to understand that there's no quick fix. It took a lot of time, and as you mentioned, a lot of conversations. And the second thing for me is everyone always talks about people having to be brave and having these bold conversations. But for me, the bravest you can be is if you're vulnerable. And that's something you just mentioned. But for you to, not you as an individual, but for anyone to feel comfortable being vulnerable, that environment has to be created. And again, that I think for me personally can only be created through trust. If I trust that me being vulnerable won't be taken, or I won't be taken advantage of, kind of thing. For me, that's the only way of creating that. So it has been a hard journey, but one that has been well worth it, seeing what we've created as a team together over the years.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And one thing I think there's quite a distinct difference in too on top of that is you can have a great team environment and great cohesion, and you can still have smaller pockets of really close friendships. But a feeling of like whenever you're on the pitch or whenever you're working together, like, you're all there for the common goal. And I think like, I sometimes, I've seen it in club environments where you go, the best teams love to socialise together and everyone's best friend and everyone does, all these things outside of football together. And I think that's totally possible. But I think one of the best things about the national team is it's another good example of there's some pockets of really close friends, which is great. I think everyone's got their little group, which is perfect. But there's a feeling if you're on a pitch, like everyone's got your back. And I just think that's quite like a distinct difference. And, it's not just like, well, when you're on the pitch, like, if it's your best mate behind you, they've got your back. It's like you don't need them to be the person that you were playing bananagrams with last night.
Yeah.
They might be that person. If they're not that person, you still know they're on the same goal.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you get in team environments, the small groups of people that spend time away from football then become small groups of people at football. And it's not intentionally divisive, but it just sometimes doesn't create like the bigger cohesion. Whereas I think like just having that awareness of we're all here together. It's also still totally cool that some of the people here are some of my best friends, because that's actually just another layer of something. When you look back at the end of your career, you're going to go, how cool was it that we were in the national team at the same time? Like, that's amazing because we're best friends.
If Sophie hadn't sent me your CV and I had seen you on TV a couple of times, I would have said, now you sound like a real leader. Where does it come from? Because something I found really fascinating, which Sophie sent over, is that you were captain of all the teams you played for. Was that something you aspired to do? You worked towards? How did it happen? Or do you just have that aura?
In Rach.
I've never like aspired to that ever. I don't really know where it comes from. I guess like, I suppose in some ways, because I had it from an early stage of my career, it probably quite naturally became something that I worked on, almost at like a subconscious level. I think two things I probably have always been though is I've always wanted to be one of the most in sport, and this is in sport and life, studies and everything. Like I always try my absolute best. Like I'm overly competitive to the point like I ruin sport for other members of my family and my friends because it's just not fun for them, because I will go to any length to win. Like it's too much at times. It even annoys me because I just can't enjoy sport for fun. Like as a kid, I honestly broke so many tennis rackets because if I wasn't winning, I just would smash it off the ground. Like the amount of times my mum marched me off the tennis court for thinking it was okay to do that.
Sophie, that sounds similar to you. I've seen a couple of tennis rackets flying.
I knew you were going to bring that up. Rach, why did you bring that up? That's going to be the discussion at the Christmas table now.
Sorry.
That's okay.
He must be a leader.
If I was smashing tennis rackets back in the day. I just got so frustrated and annoyed with myself. That was more my reason, I think.
Yeah, I'm like, why would you hit that out?
Yeah, exactly. Why are you so stupid? Just keep it.
Yeah. So I've always had that, which I think that's not necessarily the reason you would become a leader or a captain, but it is something that gives you an edge. And I think I sort of, when I have that competitiveness and sort of hard work and drive, it then sort of sets you up as being someone who's quite naturally just an example for others, because it's like if there are people there who aren't working hard, it's like this person's in your team and they're working harder than you. Like you got to do more.
I think it allows you to lead without words. You lead by actions, by example. So as much as you can, if you want to and have to be, can be a vocal leader, you don't have to because you already set the example by just doing you.
Yeah. And I think I still very much try and do that. Like I'd be one of the first in the morning most days. I always do my gym work. I always do sort of kind of pre-activation in the gym, which now I need to do because my body won't control it fully. It's actually more for me than for anybody else. But I don't know, I just have the mindset of do all the things as well as you can, and you give yourself the best chance to play well. And by default, you become someone that other people potentially should look up to, because this is somebody who's doing everything that's as much as they can, as much as they know to do. So probably that. And then I think then as I've seen the game grow, I've become much more passionate and a much bigger advocate for just trying to do things broadly in the game well, which then I think naturally makes you use your voice more. And you kind of learn how to use your voice and how to then speak on behalf of others. And, again, just realize sort of the bigger picture than just yourself. Like there's lots of reasons why it's important to stand up for things that you think maybe aren't right, and then also stand up and ask for things that you think, look, we can do this better, so what do you think about this? And I think it's just evolved. It's definitely not been an aspiration, but there's a lot of different situations whereby it's been a very big privilege.
What's been the most difficult situation for you as a captain or a leader in one of the teams, be it national team or club?
I think there's probably a few different examples. There's been some tough things with the national team. Obviously, more recently, there was the situation whereby we were trying to just sort of fight for an improvement in the standards that we felt were for sort of fair for us to be given as part of the senior national team. And that was probably quite a difficult process. And there's the difficulty in the fact you're sort of leading a group of people in something that you've never done before. It's also quite stressful because there became a sort of legal element to it, which is not something I'm familiar with. And it became quite serious in how it sort of progressed, which again is just something that when you've never done it before, it's tough. And also you're trying to represent. I think at the time, we've got about a list of somewhere between 35 and 40 players that form the pool of women's national team players, which to speak and make decisions on behalf of 40 different people is just challenging in itself from a logistical point of view, as well as a literal point of view. So that was sort of lots of little learning curves along the way.
But seeing that it became so big, it seemed like you poked the bear and did something right?
Hopefully.
You're totally wrong.
More of the negative and the resistance, more loudly than you hear sort of the praise of the outcome. But yeah, I think it was an important thing to do, and I think overall it was a good outcome and an amicable. I think more importantly as well, an amicable outcome, because I think there's never, as much as there was some tension there, it was never the intention to cause friction beyond just wanting to, improve the standards and framework that were in place. So I think that was really important. And then other examples I think I've been through is probably just dealing with tough environments within teams. Like I think there was, even just last year at Villa, there was quite a lot of tension within the changing room. There was kind of this feeling that there was a little bit of unrest, and I think I found that really difficult because in a lot of ways I probably reflected quite hard and put a lot of responsibility on me to sort of understand why that was, and was that my failings that led to that. And I think just trying to understand and work through that, and even know what could I have done differently or what should I have done better, I think is probably that for me was personally one of the toughest experiences. And there's other times when you just, team's not doing well, that can be heavy to try and keep everyone on board and moving in the right direction. Or I've been in environments where you've been captain and there's maybe been some difficult feelings towards, managers, or managers are left and you've had that crossover and all these things. There's just lots of different adversities all the time. Like, it's just constantly little challenges and little battles and conversations and things happening all the time. And kind of interestingly, I was doing something else and I was doing some media work, and one of the producers of the show was just sort of chatting, and he went, captains of football teams, they just pretty much do, like, they walk out for a game and they do like coin toss at the start. And that, like, what else do they do? And I was thinking, you're wrong.
Yeah, right. You understood the task.
Yeah, I'm like, I wish I just had to worry about in the coin. But
with everything you as a captain, natural leader, do behind the scenes off the pitch, how difficult is it for you to still focus on Rachel Corsie, the football player that wants to be her best on the pitch? Has that ever become a distraction?
I would say I couldn't remember the last time I stepped on the pitch and was just purely thinking about my own prep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very rare for there not to be some sort of not necessarily focus, but just something that's just added quite a bit to your week or your game day, or and sometimes it's quite small things. There can be lots of little small things, or but there's kind of always things ongoing, and in some ways that maybe helps me because it can be, I have quite a stable routine on a match day that I feel quite comfortable in that routine of not feeling overly focused on myself. I think if you were someone who wanted to do that, then it potentially is hard. And I think probably the other hard thing is there's a level of expectation when you're the captain that I sort of view it as like people expect you to be 7 out of 10. So if you're a 7 out of 10, people are not like, well, you had a good game. They're just like, well, you did what we expected. So it can be quite like an unforgiving role at times, because there's often you often get very little praise because not that you're always after praise, but I think everyone knows that praise at times is nice. It's pretty rare to sort of get that in this on an equal level to, I think, a lot of others, just because you carry that added level of expectation, or just that added level of because you're the captain, the leader, you'll always have that kind of level mindset. You won't necessarily need like picked up, or it's less likely that people check on you because they perceive it as, no, you're the one that checks on us. So I think sometimes that's where it can be pretty challenging. Even probably just now through my rehab, it's everyone sort of is still asking of you, like, there's even conversations in leadership meetings of, sort of people saying, remember and just keep check on the players, or like try and be around at this time, or make sure and I enjoy that, so I don't mind doing it. But it's also on top of then the stress and the burden that comes with sort of the rehab and obviously needing to focus. Like, I need to put a lot more focus on me at the moment because I'm trying to get over those hurdles. But then you're trying to sort of suppress that outwardly and just try and still be that person that people can lean on. And yeah, sometimes when you go home at night, you just need a little rant about that, and then you go again the next thing.
I thought you were going to say cuddle or something, but you go rant.
Well, do you feel it's a burden, and maybe it's even hindered you in achieving even higher levels of always being captain and focusing on others more than on yourself?
Maybe. And I don't know. I think sometimes I kind of enjoy that. I'm probably motivated by always finding another level, or the next target, or just like, I'm probably quite goal orientated in general. So sometimes that sort of encourages me to keep going, just having that sort of drive, and just always the kind of not letting anything rest and just looking for the next thing. But there are also times when it takes its toll, and I realise, right, I've sort of been pushing for too long. Like, I need a day just to be like, today's not going to be a day of growth. Today's just going to be a day on the sofa.
We all
and I struggle the most with that. Like, I really struggle with that. I feel like, can you just rest? I'm like, no, I need to find something to do.
No. So you spoke about your age a couple of times, and you mentioned your knee a couple of times. Maybe two questions, and to maybe even to round it off. So, but how long are you going to put your body through all this? And do you have a plan for afterwards?
Okay, so first question, how long? I think probably as long as it'll let me. I think eventually my body will win. So
You have a strong mind, though.
Yeah, I am pretty stubborn. I think probably as well, like, as long as I'm going to always keep trying, as long as I feel there's, that goal, that motivation. And I was really looking forward to this season. I felt really good. I was available for every game last season. I played in every game last season for the club, other than I was suspended for one, which was actually my first ever game I missed for suspension. Which I was quite proud of at my age.
As you can imagine, I've missed a fair few. That's no surprise, I think.
So I was really looking forward to this season, and then I had a really good pre-season. And literally the Wednesday before the season started, we were at a Friday night game. I just had this little flare up. So it kind of came out of the blue, and in the end we felt surgery was the best option, or was required. So I wasn't really anticipating that. I was really looking forward to this season. So I'm sort of very motivated to get back playing. And then obviously with the national team, we have the Euros in the summer, and I think quite naturally that's very motivating too. So I think for for those two things, that's sort of the short-term ambition. And, I think when you are this age and you're playing professional sport at a very high level, then sort of probably operating year at a time is kind of how it goes. And sort of in terms of next steps, I don't think you're ever ready. Like, it does terrify me to think about, am I ready? But I think I also have achieved a lot. I feel like I have a lot of peace and happiness over so many of the things I've done and the different places I've been and the people I've met and played with and against. The things I've had such a huge opportunity that I'm very grateful for that. And I do feel sort of emotionally ready in some capacity, or as ready as you can be without sort of pretending like it's going to be an easy thing to do. And I have sort of that chartered accountancy business background, and I probably have learned and had opportunities within the game between being sort of captain, working with the Players Association in the States, being quite active within FIFPro since I came back to the WSL and the league here. I feel I've kind of built a bit of a connection with people who operate in a more strategic level around the women's game. So in some ways, I feel I've covered a lot of bases to know, right, when you stop, hopefully there will be an opportunity that feels like it's a good fit for me, that maybe encompasses lots of different things that I've done, and leads me on a different path. So there we are.
Time will tell, I guess.
Yeah. I do think with that, though, it's like the same when you move clubs. Like, I've had a few difficult transfer windows, and you're filled with anxiety, and the only thing I can say is the right option comes in the moment it's supposed to come. So it's like you're so stressed for like these few weeks. It's so uncomfortable, and you're like kind of going back and forth of like, I need to force a decision, or I need to make a decision, or I need to find an answer. And then in the right moment, you know what the answer is, or you know which club you're going to, or you know what the opportunity is going to be. And so I kind of just want, and I sort of have some kind of trust in that will be the case again. And I'm just going to sit back and be like, let all these opportunities come to me. Like, I obviously will in some ways be trying to look for them, but without probably, hopefully, that feeling of I need to find something now that fits for what's good for me. So,
and you probably have done everything to set yourself up for this opportunity to come. It's not like you've been playing for 20 years but haven't done anything bar standing on a pitch and playing football. I think the same with how you take your pre-ad and everything else very seriously. You have put yourself in a situation to succeed beyond the pitch when the time is right and feels right for you.
I hope so.
Well, it was a mean question of mine, but I think now, as you said, the focus will probably just be on you getting better, and everything else is for the future, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the game plan.
I told you ask really tricky questions.
It's questions that interest me, but thank you very much, Corsie. It's been really lovely talking to you. Thank you for opening up and giving us all these insights.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, Rach. And hopefully see you very soon. And thank you to all you again for listening, and see you next time.